So moving on, let's move into our final segment of the day, or certainly our final sort of news-driven segment of the day, and that is the discovery of a torso in Cairo, which the news outlets, presumably driven by someone at a press release level, rushed to identify as being the torso of Ramses II. But it turns out that it was the torso of another pharaoh. I'm afraid his name I find very hard to pronounce. Can you remember how it's pronounced?
Psammetich, I think, isn't it?
I think that's the one. Yes, yes. It turned out actually to be him, and I think we both found this story particularly interesting for its, I suppose, what it says about how archaeology again is sort of used in the modern world. I mean, it feels, especially if you look at, for example, there's a BBC News story which we'll put a link to below. We'll put a link to lots of different stories here, linked with this one below. But the BBC article, it has photos with I think the Crown Prince of Denmark. It feels a bit Howard Carter, doesn't it? This kind of use of Egypt as almost as a marketing tool, I think. Given that this torso was found in a slum just outside of Cairo.
I think you're right. I mean, you can layer it with all sorts of symbology. I mean, the obvious one when you see the pictures of this. I mean, it is a wonderful find. It's the fragments of part of the colossal statue of the pharaoh. It's probably relatively late, around about between 700 and 600 BC. Although some people have said, it could be a reused statue of Ramses II, but it's certainly named for this Pharaoh Psammetich. But the immediate thing I thought of was the Shelley poem about Ozymandias. I'm Ozymandias, king of kings. Look upon my works, ye mighty, and repent. It's the giant foot in the desert, which was inspired by those very fragments of ancient Egypt that were being discovered and popularized in Western Europe in the late 18th, early 19th century, and led to the Champollion and the decipherment of the hieroglyphs and so on. It throws right back to that colonial, archaeological, antiquarian view of Egypt. But I think the really fascinating thing about it is that was being promoted by the Egyptian government.
Well, and I think this is where it not only reminds me of, for example, Howard Carter and the way that those things were put, as you say, sort of post-colonialist view of Egypt, but also, the fact that now they're actively using it, and they always have. The pyramids have always been actively used by whichever regime essentially was in charge, but they're actively using it, and that sort of pizzazz to kind of bring people back to Egypt. There are reasons why people might be avoiding Egypt at the moment, and I think it's very interesting because, for example, I guess again some of these photographs are, they clearly they set up purple backlights. They had it under high vis. It was a real show, and I think you were saying it was processed through the city to the museum.
It was, yeah. But yes, it was, and I think that, and again the great irony of it. This is a fabulous story that is layered with ironies and really informative, evocative images. Is that it was actually found during works in a slum area of Cairo. It was so some of the poorest and most deprived people in Egypt, who are perhaps the ones who are arguably least well served by their government, maybe, are the background artists in this piece of archaeological theatre that's being staged for the cameras and for the international media. And in the end, they get the JCB in, they strop the statue fragments, they pull them out, and they do the whole presentation, and they did process it off through the city to the Cairo Museum.
And I suppose in some ways, I think as has been observed previously on this, certainly on the ArchaeoSuite YouTube channel, in some ways we're yet to really top the power of the ancient world in terms of its imagery, and what that evokes in the modern world. It's almost though we're still kind of harkening back to that. And so when a great big pharaoh statue is pulled out of the ground, it's just as worthy as the pomp. And yet, as you say, there is an irony inherent in that, in so much as that this pharaoh probably thought that statue would never collapse. And it's been discovered in an Egyptian context of a government and a political system which has seen collapse and rise and collapse and rise in a tenuous political environment at the moment. It's a fascinating mirror.
Yeah, I mean, some commentators on this have actually made the observation that in many respects the most recent big man pharaoh of Egypt, Mubarak, was toppled statue-like by the Arab Spring only a few years ago. So and in fact, that was a moment which dislocated whatever the rights and wrongs of what happened then, but it's dislocated the Egyptian political culture, Egyptian economy particularly, and has led to the need for media spectaculars like this, as you say, to try and show that this wonderful country has a culture that is still open for business and open for tourism.
Yeah, and so it's I don't know, it was just fascinating. Not only a very important and impressive archaeological discovery, but also in terms of the remit of this podcast. Watching it from the outside, it's been a fascinating bit of theatre, I think, and there's so many ways in which that's both appropriate and also bizarre, certainly.